longer.
All right, are y'all able to do the roll call on your end?
Yes, we can do that.
We need to.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay.
Okay, we're live on YouTube.
All right, Josh, we're ready.
All right, we will call the meeting to order, but we may need to first establish a quorum via a roll call. So if city staff is able to call the roll, we'll proceed with that.
Okay. Benjamin Gomez,
Here.
Enid Wade, Jason Ramos,
Here.
Jed Cole, Jeremy Vickers,
Here.
Joe Mayfield,
Here.
Josh Warderud,
Here.
Kim Kazanis, Pete Gretzinger, Ray Jefferson, Ross Harris, Tara Briscoe,
Present.
David Mercer,
Here.
Herb Cross,
Here.
Ken Cooper,
Here.
Scott Bland.
Here.
All right, looks like we've established a quorum, so let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Peters to lead us through the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and commission members. Good afternoon. Thank y'all. I know this has been extra work for this commission, but we do appreciate it. This is an important initiative for the city, so we do appreciate y'all's time on this. We got Jessica Vassar and Eddie Haas again with us from Freeze and Nichols. We're going to go through a presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion. If you have any questions along the way, just feel free to jump in there. So what we're going to talk about at this meeting, Jessica, you flip next slide, is we've had, since our last CIAC meeting, we've had another meeting with the Home Builders Association, the Association of General Contractors. So we wanted to give you some feedback that we received from that meeting. We wanted to go over some of the revised policy considerations. At our last meeting, we did go over those, but we have refined those even more from last time. And then Freeze and Nichols, Jessica and Eddie are going to go over some additional sample fee calculations of some different development scenarios that we received from our home builders meeting. We'll open it up for question and answer and discussion with the full committee, talk about next steps, and then potentially talk about action on a recommendation to city council. We are advertising on our agenda for action today. If the commission is ready to do that, or we have the option of having another meeting on Monday next week if there's additional information or consideration for the commission. So we did have a productive meeting Thursday of last week with the Home Builders Association, and Scott and Ken and Herb and David were all at that meeting. So feel free to jump in with any comments that y'all have from your perspectives on that. But a lot of the comments from those meetings, a lot of the discussion was around meter considerations with irrigation. Should irrigation meters be exempted? Consideration for a similar fee for the 5/8 inch and 1 inch meters for residential. Temporary construction phase meters, and those would be meters that are put in at the beginning of development but are later taken out for the permanent meters for the development. How commercial and shopping centers will be treated for a shell permit versus the tenant finish out permits, and then facility expansions, and then some of those fee calculation scenarios. And then I believe, and this is where I'd like to get feedback from some of the developer group, is there was a general consensus that I think we're pretty good on target for residential impact fees, but there's still some concerns about on the commercial side. So Lisa Tyre, our utilities director, is on the line, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of our considerations with some of the meter comments that were received. Lisa, are you there?
I am here.
Can you talk about the irrigation meters and then the 5/8 to 1 inch meter?
Yeah, so every connection point, which a meter is considered a connection point, requires for us to be able to provide a certain amount of consumption in our storages, in our plant, whether or not it's used year round, whether or not it's used ever, we still have to have, we still have to size everything so that we're able to provide water to that connection point. So even if somebody has an irrigation meter and they have a domestic meter, we have to, it's not like one household counts for so much consumption. It's both of those connection points. Regulatory wise, we have to be able to provide a certain amount of water to, which means everything in our system has to be sized to provide that water to those connection points. What was your other question, Clint?
And it's kind of the same principle for the considering the 5/8 and 1 meter as one fee.
Yeah, in particular, whenever we talk about the 1 inch meter on residential accounts, it is almost always an extremely large house. And, you know, we pulled up an example the other day, and I won't say who the customer is, but they have a 7,000 square foot house on an 1.5 acre lot, and they're doing everything off of a 3/4 inch meter. So when someone decides to put a 1 inch meter in, and a lot of people do because of the way they do their sprinkler systems, and they want to not have very many zones. So they want to run a lot of water on just a few sprinkler system zones. A lot of times they want to put in a larger meter because of that. But there are so few residential sprinkler systems that, in my opinion, that shouldn't be a consideration.
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead, Joe.
Lisa, I got a question. This is Joe Mayfield.
Yeah, hey,
my
Joe.
understanding that the major load on the water system is irrigation. Is that not correct?
That is a very, very correct statement. So in the wintertime, Waco uses, somewhere between 20 and 24 million gallons a day. And the summer times, we can double that, sometimes double that plus a little bit more. We'll see in the 50s, 50 million gallon range. So that should tell you what an irrigation system does to our system. And it's not just you have an irrigation system, it's just outside watering does that.
And I think because of those reasons, staff, has considered that, but we do not feel like exempting the irrigation meters is the way to go because of that impact on the capacity of the system. Same with the 5/8 to 1 meter. There is a larger impact, and that should be captured in the impact fee. The temporary construction phase meters, that is something that we will not charge an impact fee because those go away. The fee will just be charged on the permanent meters that are installed, for the ultimate build out of the lot. Same with the commercial. There's a lot of discussion about, especially on shopping centers where you have, one contractor that's doing the shell building, and how does that work with impact fees? Because impact fees are collected at building permit. That is something that we'll have to address internally with our, how we SOP when we're collecting the fees at permits, but we will have that calculated and tied to the shell building permit part of it. And then facility expansions, that is something if it's determined that it is going to increase capacity needs, that there will be a fee charged on the delta, so the existing development and whatever's added, if they have to add additional capacity or additional capacity on the water and sewer, if it's going to generate more traffic, then there would be a roadway impact fee. If it doesn't, and that can be shown to staff, then there would be no additional fee on that. Ken, Scott, David, Herb, is there anything else y'all want to recap from our meetings last week?
This is Herb Cross. Our meeting last week and our meeting what was it, yesterday. I think you're probably real close on meters. I believe we more or less agreed that residential irrigation meters don't really make sense for the homeowner. But one of the things we wanted to discuss a little further from our meeting at the Home Builders Association was that we want to make sure that we don't jump into this impact fee adoption and shoot ourselves in the foot and kill economic development in our city. And so on the construction side, we want to know what that is commercially, specifically. And we do not feel like there's been enough study done to let people know exactly how adding these fees to a commercial project is going to impact the economic development for the city. So I think the issue and the thing that we came up with at the Home Builders was that we would like to see the impact fees for the residential go ahead and go into effect, but to delay the commercial side of it until such time as we can guarantee, or at least have a good feel for the adverse effects to economic development that fee is going to have.
This is David. I'll just kind of back up what Herb just said. I think everybody's, I don't want to speak for Scott or Ken. They can speak up for themselves, but I think we're all good with the residential components that we're suggesting here. But from the builder development community, I think there needs to be a little bit more due diligence and thought put into the commercial side. So I think we'd be okay with the residential stuff as proposed, but we need to put a little bit more work into the commercial components.
Plant, or I guess I got my question is for these guys. I don't think there's any way to come up with a number. I mean, if there is, tell me. It's just at some point in time you have to say, okay, we've done enough study, and on the city side, I think they need to know what point in time that is. I mean, you can't definitively say, okay, it is, no, it's not going to have an impact on commercial development.
Yeah, and so, staff talked a lot about this and what could be done, that it's really difficult. And we sent y'all some, and I know we just sent it to you yesterday. So a lot of those studies, but there's not a lot of specific studies, case studies for cities. And I think the reason is because there's so many variables or assumptions that have to be made when companies are looking for, site selections for economic development, whether it be job force or cost of living or, site considerations or, impact fees, or there's just a lot of different things that go into that. I think, and as we'll go through the recommendations, we tried to address a lot of those concerns that would potentially, be a negative for somebody looking for our community to relocate. I think, the best thing to do from our staff standpoint is, obviously, as we implement this and, start charging the fees and we're going to have to continuously evaluate it and see how it's impacting, our community and be able to pivot if we're having consequences that, we didn't foresee or that we don't like. We have been working with our economic development partners over the chamber. We had some follow-up meetings with them. They've addressed, provided some considerations that we've included in here. And, I think, that's the way that staff would treat that. I don't know, even if we pause this to do a study, I don't know, we hadn't found where that's a viable option. And then there would be a lot of assumptions as part of that study that I don't know what you would get in the end, that would give you much more information that you would get, just going through the implementation and then, adjusting based on what's actually happening in the economic environment, that's, happening after we implement the ordinances. So let me go through the policy considerations. These are very similar to what you saw last time. We have refined them again a little bit, but we did decide not to charge the full maximum calculated rate that we could charge. We talked about you automatically have to take a 50% credit, and that off the top required by state law, and that equated to about $7,500 maximum calculated fee for a single family residence. Our recommendation is that be even reduced more to a $4,500 per single family fee inside the city. And then we're outside the city in our ETJ where we can just charge water and wastewater. Roadways cannot be charged in the ETJ. We would charge the full amount for water and wastewater. And the reason behind that is to incentivize developers to annex into the city. So you see those. We have drawn out that effective date to June 1st, 2021. And I'll show you a table that kind of shows how that plays out. And then fees, would not be collected for a period of 2 years for developments that are either already final platted or have final plat approval by council by the effective date. And then we do have a phase in for developments that are already approved with a preliminary plat or final plat at the time of adoption of the ordinance. And that phase in is over that 5-year period from 2021 to 2025 at the 20%. And so you see at the very end, we're only going to charge up to 30% of that total calculated fee. Go to the next slide. So here's a table that kind of shows how that plays out. It says if and then. We also have a consideration in there for existing developments that have over 80% of the lots already developed. This was some feedback that we got from the Home Builders Association. It doesn't make sense to charge impact fees on some lots that hadn't been built on for whatever reason, when all the other lots in that phase did not have impact fees. So if you have a final plat and then 80% of the lots already developed, your impact fee is exempt for the remaining lots at time of permitting. And then here's the point I just made. The final plat is approved before June 1st, 2021. You would pay no fees for those first 2 years, and then you would come in 2023 at 60%, then 80%, and 100% in 2025. And then if you have a preliminary plat approved, then you can go through the phasing 20%, 40%, up to 100%, excluding those that have the 2-year exemption with no fee. And so this helps kind of provide that runway for existing developments where they can slowly include those into their development costs and not get hit with those all at once. Next slide, please. And then we do have the exemptions. Most of these have stayed the same. We did include some additional exemptions related to the cap. You know, originally we just had a $75,000 cap on there. After we looked at it more, the big variable on most developments is the roadway portion of that fee. And with the larger water and wastewater users having so much impact on the system, we felt like those should not be capped. And so 99%, over 99% of our existing meters in developments would be capped at 75, but there would be those very large users that could potentially pay more than 75 with water and wastewater. So the way the exemptions work for roadway impact fees is that the roadway impact fees will be exempted for what I would call primary sector uses, manufacturing, distribution, logistics, you know, those job creators that, you know, that we're concerned about. The roadway impact fees would be automatically exempted for those. And then for all the other uses, water and wastewater impact fees that do not exceed 75,000. And like I said, that's the 99% of the developments. The total fee would not exceed more than 75,000. And then for those, you know, less than 1% of developments that do have larger than 75,000 fees for water and wastewater, we would exempt the roadway portion of that. And then we do have in our economic development waiver policy that those can be considered on a case-by-case basis by council to exempt those fees through our economic development policy. We talked about the 80%, 20%. We have the core areas with the maps that we've talked about. I'll show those again, but where for single-family residential infill areas, any single family in those areas would have a 0 fee. And then for our city core and traditional commercial corridor areas, they would get their fee reduced in half for non-residential uses. Then we do have the change of use. If you're changing use and you're not increasing service units, that's exempted. And then schools are exempted, and those would include private and public, including universities and colleges. And then we did add this from our last meeting, dealing with fire flows. We got some feedback, you know, sometimes the meter sizes get increased due to the need for fire flows, for fire protection, sprinkler systems. And so we backed out that portion, exempted that portion of the fee. So that will not be charged if the meter gets increased due to the need for additional fire flows. Next slide. There we go. And then here's the single family residential infill area. Again, this was based on policy that's already been adopted by city council with our residential tax abatement area. So any single family residence built in this area would be exempted completely from impact fees. And then the next map shows our commercial core and traditional commercial corridors. So in that yellow area, the impact fee would be reduced by additional 50%. And then this map is also, this area has also been adopted by city council through our economic development tax abatement program. And so it includes the Imagine Waco plan area, and then some of our older traditional commercial corridors like Robson Drive and like LaSalle and 18th Street and parts of Bosque, Waco Drive.
Hey, Clint, this is Benji. Can you touch on a little bit about what it means for 50% reduction for non-residential or just commercial usage? Is that from the 5,000 proposed impact fee, or?
Yeah, let us show you some of the examples, and then we could, I think it will make more sense, and then we can, because they will show what the impact fee would be, and then you would reduce that by 50%. So I think some of those examples will explain that. So we'll go through that and then provide that information.
Awesome, thanks.
Sure. Next slide. And then this was our affordable housing exemption inside the city limits only. These are all based on area median income qualifiers. We had our housing department draft this up, and it's consistent with our housing priorities for affordable housing within the city limits. Next slide. And then here's our economic development. We did add the existing business expansion and relocation exemption from our last meeting. The first one is dealing with amending our tax abatement policy, and then our 380 agreement policies that impact fee waivers can be considered through there, and those would require city council approval. That's our economic development policy that you see for large industries coming into town. And then we added this existing business or legacy business expansion and relocation exemption. And so this was feedback that we got from the chamber about what about those businesses that are homegrown, that primary industry businesses that are expanding or have outgrown their facility and they're wanting to stay in Waco. Should we be charging them an impact fee? So this addresses those, where those would be exempted if they've been within Waco for a period of 5 years, that they're increasing, their expansion is tied to increasing production or business capacity, again, limited to those primary sector jobs. And then they have to provide some verification that their number of jobs and salaries are equal to or greater than their original location.
Hey, Clint, like I said, I'm just reading off some of the notes that I took earlier. Is there any considerations that are given towards those small businesses that don't fall within those primary sectors? I feel like, and this is just me looking in general, I feel like a lot of the small businesses that are being created are kind of in those retail shops, food services type.
Yeah, so there is under the tax abatement policy, which we would add the fee waivers, there is some small business thresholds in there that they can qualify. And those location exemptions are tied to those that would be in those areas. So there is consideration, there is opportunity for consideration for those already in some of our economic development policies that would be added to include the impact fees.
Okay. Would we ever give consideration to maybe a deferral period of, if we were to move forward and charge them an impact fee, just given that, the first 1 to 3 years are pretty tumultuous time for small businesses in terms of, becoming operational. Would we ever give consideration to people that fall outside of those primary sectors, give them a deferral period to where we give them time to get on their feet and then we can impose the impact fee just to allow them to, generate some revenue and become acclimated to where they're planting roots?
So there would be that opportunity if they fall within the phasing time periods. And then like I said, the tax abatement policy does include other businesses that don't fall within that, what I would call primary sector jobs, some of the commercial retail jobs. And then, I would say a lot of small businesses start off in existing buildings. I mean, you do get some building new construction, but I would think the majority of them do fall in that exemption where it would be a change of use or going into an existing facility where there would be no impact fee.
Mm.
Clint, I'll echo Benji's concerns and ideas. I think we talked about this last time, and I'm sure others on here would be willing to speak into their specific situation. But I do agree on the principle that many of these small businesses will start in leased spaces, particularly in the central business district or the core. But as we look outside or along other business corridors that are going through redevelopment, I think we may see a little bit more. David may be able to speak to that specifically since he's observing that in some of the corridors that he's involved with. But I wanted to go back to the tax abatement policy for small businesses. What I just tend to see a lot of issues with small businesses qualifying for those as opposed to medium and large businesses. So do you have the ability to speak into those specific requirements they would need to meet so that we can kind of understand whether or not a lot of the use cases that we might be looking at in a minute would qualify for a fee waiver?
Yeah, I don't have those right in front of me. I do have that policy in my office. The thresholds are, if I remember right, are a lot lower. They're in the, can be into the single digits for employees. But those are tied to some of those areas, those traditional commercial corridor areas, and not, what I would call greenfield new development areas.
Thanks.
Next slide. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and Eddie, and they're going to go through some of these additional scenarios that were requested from our meeting last week with the home builders and AGC.
Yeah, so these are just some additional examples that were requested. So we'll go through each of these individually. The first one is a 10,000 square foot bank. And we assumed that this would have a 1-inch meter for water. And so then we'd have the same on wastewater. And it's a 2-step process that you may remember. The first thing we do is we assess the fee on the maximum allowable. So we'd have the 10,000 square feet and the units are per 1,000 square feet of development. A bank is generating 6.6 service unit equivalents per 1,000 square feet. And then you go through the multiplication here and it's $46,000 on roads, and then you can see the water, wastewater. But then the collection rate is only at what we would be adopting. So then you can see that we would only be collecting the $38,948 on a bank. And this is in service area 9. So this is not in one of those areas that would have an exemption in the downtown area.
Yeah, so if this was located in those exemption area, you would cut that 38,000 in half.
Correct. Any questions about this one? We can come back to these if we need
Jessica,
to. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
One of the things that I think we brought up in the past, and it's not my background, so forgive me, but is looking at this as a percentage of the total cost or an estimated percentage of the total cost of a build. And again, I know that ranges dramatically on a lot of factors, but this is probably not, unless it's a TFNB bank, it's probably not the most expensive build in the world. Sorry, that was a local joke. And so, as a percentage on whatever dollar per square foot, I think it'd be helpful if we could evaluate the impact, the direct impact, because the gross dollars are one thing, right? But that percentage, to me, what's it going to affect on this particular organization? Is that something anybody here, Clint, you guys could help? Even some of the builders on here could help us understand.
Yeah, I would probably lean on Herb or David to give that with their experience.
Jeremy, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, and I know, David, you're not going to have the answer on all of these, but as an example, what would this per square foot bill be on something like this, and how would the impact fees come out as a relative percentage of the total build cost?
Herb would be better in the commercial world, but my guesstimate would be in the $150 a square foot range. Would be my hunch. So 10,000 square feet, you're looking at 1.5, if I did my math right.
Great. So that's what, 2.5%, something to that effect is what that would look like in this case.
Yeah, and that when we had the home builders meeting, we ran through a bunch of scenarios, and it appeared a lot of them we were in that 2 to 3% range on a lot of the scenarios.
Great. That's the ballpark I was kind of looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to follow on the scenario of the 10,000 square foot bank, if there's drive-in lanes, that would be about the same as 4 drive-in lane bank. So if obviously if there were 2 drive-in lanes, it would be much lower, about 14,000 would be the collection rate. So it's a function of the lanes for drive-in banks.
Ready to go to the next one? Next, we have 5,000 square feet of medical or dental type office. So, you know, just going through the same, and again, all of these we assumed roadway service area 9. So going through the same calculation, you can see the different trip generation rate for the roadway side. Again, we have a 1-inch meter. So this would be assessed at $56,000 and then collected at $36,229. And I guess if we want to, you know, try to figure out what this percentage is, do we think this would be the same cost per square foot, $150 per square foot to build this? So if it's $750,000 and it's 36,229 divided
Gonna have a much
by-
higher cost per square foot in it because of
right.
significant amount more plumbing and
Oh, okay.
infrastructure involved in that than a bank.
Thank you, Scott. $200 per square foot. Okay. So if we assume $200 per square foot, I'm just doing these calculations while we're going through each example. That's about $1 million. So about 3%.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 3.6. Yeah. Next, we have 2,000 square feet of office. And so that would be assessed at the 42,772 and then collected at 24,651. You want to try to calculate a percentage on this one? Would we assume the 150? So that would be, this would be a pretty high percentage potentially.
I would assume that's harder though, because it's smaller, right? At 2,000, you've got a lot of base cost that just doesn't get distributed out over the square feet.
Right.
So it probably
Yeah.
has a higher per square foot cost.
Mm-hmm. So, but maybe a higher percentage on this one, depending on the cost of construction. I guess it's just really going to depend on what type of office we're building. There's a lot of variables here, obviously.
Kind of a spin-off of this scenario was in our meeting last week with the HBA, there was a question about, well, what about an expansion of an office, you know, say by 3,000 square feet? I think that was the scenario. And the net increase or the net impact is what's subject to the fee. But there was follow-on discussion about, well, what if it's not really being used for any new additional, you know, whether it's office demand, it's maybe more storage, things like that. I think that would be more on a case-by-case basis. But at the base level, the net increase is subject to the fee, and then subject to the interpretation by staff on what's going on with that addition, there could be some consideration for a reduction in that fee.
Yeah, so the example of, you know, if they were building adding on a boardroom and a, you know, break area, you're not increasing the meters, you're not increasing any trip generations, and that would not have any fee. If you're adding on and increasing employees, well, you know, the office actually would potentially apply for that legacy exemption. But let's say it didn't hit that threshold, then there potentially could be a fee, you know, if you're increasing traffic generations or adding a meter or whatnot.
Next, we have a 20,000 square foot church. And so going through the calculation, we've got the $41,000 assessment and the collection rate of $23,948. And on these, we are assuming a 1.5-inch meter, just guessing the type of water use they may have. Next, we have the light industrial, and so we are assessing at $54,760, collecting, assuming that they are not exempted under any of our categories. This is assuming they do not have an exemption, 32,713. And then if they did meet some of those exemptions, they would be exempted from the roadway piece, so they'd be closer to $20,000 on the collection rate.
Yeah, here in this scenario, the scenario started as within a light industrial area where you have a small office, and then maybe in the back you have some operations going on, and it kind of evolved into, yeah, okay, maybe just general light industrial. But The idea is that there's a small office with some kind of small operation going on in the back. And Jessica's correct. If it meets the test for the economic development incentive, then that fee would be reduced.
It would reduce down to 20,000 because you would exempt the roadway.
Yeah.
Correct. Any questions on this example?
I have just
yeah.
a general question that you guys may be able to answer, but I understand that these are collected when the building permit's pulled, but how are these actually paid for? And I mean that in the sense that all of my experience with banks and lending institutions is they like to tie their loan dollars to something that's tangible that they can come and get back from you. And this is something that's not really tangible or directly attributable to the value of the property that you're wanting to build and develop. It's, money that you're giving to the city to use somewhere else. So it has no direct tie to the value of your property or to the loan dollars of your property. Do lending institutions loan you those dollars, or is that normally an expense that the owner, the person that's developing the property, has to just come out of pocket in addition to all of the other upfront soft costs that they have to pay for?
I don't know to answer the bottom line question, but I do know that in pro forma statements that have been developed for perhaps larger type development, that's kind of built into the whole equation, a line item for impact fee costs. So it could be that it is from an institution from that perspective, but how it happens in terms of the actual writing the check, I'm not certain.
So I get that. So I mean, for some folks on this call, 2 to 3% may seem like a pretty low percentage as far as the cost, but if that's a cost that you're not able to get loan dollars for, that's a pretty high expense for those small businesses to have to come out of pocket for, in addition to everything else you got to come out of pocket for to get a project going.
Does anyone else want to speak on that?
I don't think we have any bankers in the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our last example here is a multifamily development where it would be maybe two different large multifamily developments that are each served by a 3-inch meter. And you can see that with the 3-inch meter, we're really having the much higher water wastewater impact fees. And so when we come over here for the assessment, we're up over $400,000 for the assessment. The collection would in theory be this $241,793, but because that is over the $75,000 cap, we would exempt the roadway piece. You come down to the policy cap and we have $0 on roadway, but we would still be collecting the full amount on water wastewater, so about $140,000. And this is a pretty unique scenario, but just something to think about and kind of how that would play out with the 75,000. Oh, this down here says retail. I'll just say multifamily, but just to kind of show how that cap would work. The next thing we want to do is,
excuse me, Jessica.
Yes, Ken.
Can we go back to that screen, please? So is there a reason why this is not capped at 75,000? Is it because it is residential?
Right. So this has
Versus-
been a little bit of a change since the last time we met. Originally, everything was going to be capped at 75,000. And since then, we have made some adjustments to the policy where water and wastewater will be paying the full amount of their impact fee. Because having a 3-inch meter is such a very large burden on your water system that we felt that charging a little bit above the 75,000 for the water wastewater side of things would be appropriate. And Clint, feel free to jump in if you have anything else to add on that.
That's correct. Just the impact on the system, and then also the impact on the rates, the overall rates. Again, we got to remember, whatever is not paid for, this infrastructure is not paid for through impact fees. It's picked up by ratepayers or taxpayers. So it has especially the large water users, water meters have a big impact on the potential rates for all Waco citizens.
Jessica and Eddie, could you guys tell me where you've already advised on other communities, other cities? Is this typical of the way this has come down? Or multifamily residential charged like similarly to what we're doing?
In my experience, there are much fewer exemptions. Most of the time, cities are charging what, they would be charging this full collection amount, and there usually isn't any sort of cap. So
we're being pretty conservative.
Yes, you're definitely making it easier for developers to come into Waco and giving a lot of incentives and breaks to developers. Usually there isn't any sort of policy consideration to limit the roadway impact fee. Do you agree with that, Eddie?
Yeah, on the impact fee side, there may be on the other side in terms of some of the economic development incentives that are, but it's not formally, from what I've seen, not formally included in the impact fee policy itself. It's just something that's applied for on a case-by-case basis. But yes, I would agree that the reductions here and the policy framework that's been developed is substantially lower than what we've seen in other communities.
Thank you.
This Herb Cross, can you go back to the 1,000 square foot office building?
This one?
We had a 2,000 square foot.
2,000 square foot, okay. All right. And so that adds $12 a square foot to your construction cost.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Correct.
That's a lot of money to be adding to somebody's small office building. For us,
Yeah, that's a big number.
That's a big number.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's scary.
$24,000. If they're looking at
let's just use a real estate office as an example. That's, I know that, and Clint, you'd understand this. I mean, this is not in the city of Waco, but I know Scroggins bought a little house right here on Highway 84 at Estates Drive. They remodeled that entire structure. I'm assuming that would have probably had to come in because of I'm not sure exactly, new construction or if redevelopment of existing structure, how that's going to be viewed. And maybe we need to address that as well. But if that was a brand new building on a lot right there, it would have been 2,000 to maybe 3,000 square feet of legitimately just offices for real estate agents.
So
Well, you're looking at $130 a foot on something like this. That's about as light a cost as any commercial development you're going to find. What Herb's talking about is correct. That is a significant amount of money.
I guess this is probably the closest commercial development to a residential build that there is, I would think. Is that a fair assumption?
Even lower. I mean, it would be even lower cost per square foot wise than residential.
But in the example that you gave, if they've bought an existing structure and they're just remodeling it, and this is assuming that this office needs a 1.5 inch meter, maybe it only needs a 1 inch meter, maybe it only needs a 5/8 inch meter. It would depend on what they're going to be doing in there. So the water wastewater piece could vary. And then on the roadway side, you would only be subject to the fee of the additional trip generation. So if it was some other purpose before, you would only pay the delta on the roadway impact fee. So if you're remodeling an existing building, it would be much, much lower than what we're seeing here.
There was also some other exemptions that were highlighted in the policy about if you're expanding within the city limits, and I think there was some sub criteria to that. If you've been in Waco over the last 5 years, and it's increase of production or business capacity, that there'd be some exemption considerations there.
Yeah.
But again, all that it would be kind of on a case by case basis. and subject to review.
Yeah, I'm looking back at our, our roadway waiver, and it does include, well, that
Or
would,
for
that
the
would,
regional office.
yeah, this wouldn't be, this example would not be that. So, yeah.
When you get I don't see you get a lot of water through a 1-inch meter. And unless, I mean, you can irrigate at night and then you don't have that, and you can use a lot, like I say, a lot of water. So if you change that from 1.5 inches to 1 inch, which I think is probably more reasonable, Herb, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, that would change that significantly, wouldn't it?
It would. So let's see what that would be. If we changed it to a 1-inch meter, let me get over here. It would be I'll do the math right now. So we'd have 4,641 on roadway, 4,641. And then we would have 2,670 on water and 5,340 on wastewater. So it'd be 12,651 for the total if we assumed a 1-inch meter. So about half.
Okay.
This Herb Cross again. I have one more question. We keep saying something subject to review and this, that, and the other, and staff can look at it. What we haven't seen in all of this discussion is an appeals process. If staff makes a decision that I personally don't agree with, what is my recourse besides going to the mayor and the city council? Established an appeals process.
There will be in the ordinance, the impact fee ordinance, there will be some language in there about an appeals process. And Clint, I haven't seen the draft, but I presume there's that kind of the standard language of appeals, but it's to the council, I believe.
But yeah, it's got the way we have it now. That's still under review by legal, but we have a staff appeal process, and then if the developer wants to appeal the staff's decision on that appeal, it can go to city council for a vote. So it's a 2-step process. It doesn't have to go to city council if staff grants the appeal, but there is a additional step where it could go to city council.
But if there's a decision in the building code that I don't agree with the building official, there's an appeals board that you go to, not go back to staff and say, hey, you made a mistake, change your mind. That don't happen. Okay?
No, it would be the same structure, but instead of going to appeals board, it would go to city council.
Okay, so in answer to my question, I go straight to the mayor and the council. If I don't get a decision out of you that I agree with, then I go straight to the mayor and the council, because I'm not going to be able to change your mind.
Well, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the way the draft ordinance has it.
Is that the way it has to be?
I mean, I've seen.
There could be if this were to be considered, there could be maybe an appeals board. You know, I don't know if that might be your
adjustments.
Drawing a blank on the typical board that hears cases on hardships and things from a land use perspective, but maybe there could be something set up from that perspective. And it's all locally driven. So Clint, if that's something that you wanted to create as part of the process, you know, it's a policy decision.
Yeah. So the way we have it set up now, like a zoning appeal, you know, if you're wanting to get a variance or something from the zoning ordinance, there is a zoning board of adjustment. But like for subdivisions, if, you know, the city's requiring you to build road or extend the water line or something that you don't agree with, that appeal process does go through plan commission and council. So that's the way we're structuring it. We weren't going to go to plan commission, but taking it to council on those. But I mean, you could create a separate board. I don't think, you know, I think we'd want to either use the council or some sort of existing committee or board, and not create another separate advisory committee or board to act on those, just because of the nature of trying to get boards populated with, volunteers, so.
Well, in the Board of Adjustment, the appeal process, if you don't like what the Board of Adjustment says, you go to district court. So your appeal doesn't go to council like it would through the Plan Commission. So I don't know, if that would change the dynamics of that process as well.
Clint, I'm not sure I'm advocating for the Plan Commission to pick up more work, as my colleagues will kill me. But considering a good portion of the group here today is Plan Commission and is supporting the process of evaluating an impact fee and will, I suspect, be a part of that review in 5 years. I wonder if it doesn't make sense to have that group be considered, because they'll learn and play a major role in both understanding it as we've gone through this process and then reevaluating it based on, what kind of appeals come through, where the issues, where the gaps are, how to strengthen, the policy in the future.
Yeah, Eddie, I guess there's no reason why the CIAC couldn't be that.
That's correct. I mean, if that's something that,
because then you get some input from the development community as well.
yeah.
Ken, it looks like you may be talking. I don't know if
Oh,
you're talking to somebody else. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out. I thought you were telling us something that you didn't want to be a part of the appeals process. Sorry.
But
Well, at this point, go ahead, Clint.
I mean, that's something we can consider with council and get the feedback. If that's, something the commission would want us to consider with the drafting of the ordinance, we can definitely put that in there for, council's consideration when they're reviewing the ordinance.
I don't want to pull us back too much, but is it time or could we have maybe a little bit more of a conversation? I don't know that we really resolved the small business / small space issue. I feel like now when I say we, I'm also speaking for me. So maybe I haven't felt that it was resolved. So that's maybe me speaking, but I look back at, and I know Jessica, the example that you recalculated does help dramatically cut that cost down. It looks like it brings it down to 5% or something to that effect, which brings it somewhat more in line. But we're also not only looking at the percentage of build costs, we're looking at the burden itself, right? The burden on the small business, and the small business owner is again typically not in the same financial situation as a large organization, whatever that might mean. And so I wonder if there's not an opportunity to have a brief discussion about a cap of some kind, if it meets certain requirements. I'm just trying to look for another way out to help the small businesses here. I'm a little nervous that when it all gets said and done, we may be sitting here looking at a lot of appeals from small businesses who are struggling because they don't know how to fit into the right bucket and their fees are pretty high.
Would you be thinking maybe about a square footage exemption or?
Yeah, I think that might be a good example. I mean, the folks, contractors, builders would know better. Where's that gonna position a lot of these small, standalone builds? Something in that 2,000 to 3,000 square foot range might be something to look at.
We can have additional conversations with the chamber about that too. Just my sense, and again, some of the builders might know better than me, but you're kind of your first generation starting a business. I don't, what is the percentage of those that are building new construction? Are they going in existing space? I'm just wondering, what percentage of new businesses would this actually impact?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one, right?
It's gonna get passed along by whoever built it. So I mean, I think that's
a good point,
a relevant point.
Yeah, so it's director, you know, at a practical level, first off, the SBA defines small business as anything under 500 employees, right? So we might sometimes look at something small, very small, and think, oh yeah, well, they're not going to build a space. But, you know, we might really be thinking more of an existing business that wants to build a larger facility that maybe has 30 or 40 employees and needs to grow and build a, you know, a couple thousand square foot retail establishment. Could be a restaurant. Restaurants are typically are very often new build spaces or facilities, or a small manufacturing company. But I think Scott's point is probably even more accurate, because the whoever's building it's going to pay the fee, and of course if they're the primary or only leaseholder, they're probably going to eat that in some form or fashion. So it'll affect them one way or another, unless we.
They're not going to eat it. And so your small business, just startups, not going to be able to rent the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about that, about, you know, your commercial, like the restaurant example. You know, my concern with the square footage is, I mean, you could have a small square footage on a chain restaurant that you would not consider a small business. And I mean, I don't think that's the intent, to exempt them, where you could potentially have one that is, and we can look at that again some more, but you know, that would be my concern about tying it to square footage, because you have small square footages that they're not small businesses.
How much are the, what is the potential impact of city ordinances in terms of landscaping and on the size of a site itself? It may be a small building, but it might have a lot of capacity or need for a lot of irrigation around the site because of the city's requirements for landscaping. Is that going to affect the size of the water meter? Obviously, the water meter size appears to be the big trigger here as to what causes that fee to go up considerably.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about that yesterday with David and Scott. I mean, David and Herb and Lisa. And, you know, I think, you know, a lot of the commercial irrigation can be accomplished without having to upsize the meter on these. And Herb and Lisa, you might have more commentary on that, but we did spend a lot of time talking about that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Clint, I got a question that sort of relates to this, but I came up with it earlier. I mean, it's my understanding that these are new buildings. So if somebody has an existing building, they've been in for 15 years, and they're adding 3 employees, and they need an office, and they're going to expand their building, they're going to use the same water meter. They're not subject to any of this, are they?
Well, if they're, go ahead,
Okay,
Clint. If they're adding 3 employees, they would be subject to a roadway fee. If there's for that additional square footage, because there would be additional traffic on the network for those employees to come to the office, but it would only be on the additional square footage. And you're right, if they didn't have to increase their meter size, there would not be a wastewater impact fee.
Okay.
And then for those, you know, primary sector jobs, we do have that legacy exemption if they're growing their business.
Mm-hmm.
What if they don't meet those primary sectors?
Then
If they don't meet that, then they would be subject to that delta between existing capacities and increased capacities.
Clint, I know that procedurally we're kind of at an interesting juncture, because one thing that we can do is wait until, I think it's next Monday lunch, to take up a vote whether to adopt in part or in whole or not at all the staff's recommendation to this committee, and also whether or not to take that up today, and then if so, how we want to take it up today. It seems like our committee has a lot of concerns on the commercial side, although, you know, none of those concerns have been articulated about the residential side. It seems like there's a pretty broad consensus on that. And, you know, I'd be interested from the committee in determining whether we feel like in 5 days' time, more questions will be answered to take this up on Monday, or whether we can just go ahead and maybe, take up, I know it sounds like Herb has a motion to bring forward in terms of a recommendation on the non-residential, but whether or not to take this up today or take this up to Monday, I think that's the kind of the threshold question.
Yeah, so the requirement for the state law and impact fees is that the advisory committee needs to submit, written comments on the land use assumption CIP and the fee calculations, along with any policy considerations, 5 days prior to the public hearing, which is October 6th. And that's 5 business days. So we do tentatively have a meeting scheduled for next Monday that we could continue to have the discussions. I do, I think our staff recommendation is pretty solid. I do, the discussion about the small business, there might be some things we can talk with the chamber and maybe fine tune that before Monday. I could see that potentially changing and from a staff perspective. Part of my concern that I would at least like the board to consider acting on that first part. Can we put the slide up that has the proposed letter?
Yep, I'm getting over there. So this is the kind of the letter, but here's the zoom in of the pertinent text.
Yeah, so that first bullet point is, action from the committee saying they agree with the adoption of the land use assumptions, capital improvement plan, and impact fee calculations for water, wastewater, and roadways as presented in the impact fee study dated July 2020, which is, the very first presentation we did back in July on the max calculated fees. And then that second bullet point is dealing more with the policy considerations. If the board wants to have staff look at more potential policy considerations for some of the small business and meet again Monday, I think that is fine. I would like the board to take some action on that first bullet point today, because if for some reason we're not able to get a quorum for next week, then we do have that issue where we're not going to meet our 5 business days to act on the part of the recommendation that's required by state law to have that public hearing on October 6th.
And if we don't have a quorum on Monday and take action on the first item, then that's just going to go to council with the maximum assumptions presented.
Well, it'll be the documentation of the land use assumptions, the CIP, and the derivation of the cost per service unit. Strictly the report, not the policy of the collection rate. So they would be, that's the top bullet there. And so whatever additional information the advisory committee would want to add is within your purview to add that. And so at a minimum, it'd be the first bullet by state law that you're commenting on that.
And my understanding is, based on our comments here today, what we're talking about is the second bullet point. The first, there haven't been major disagreements in terms of the study that was presented to us. It's the collection. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, yes.
I don't know, maybe if we could hear from one of the representatives of the builders, if they want to take up both of these or just the first one today, how they feel about that.
I'd like to see if we could just take up the first one today and maybe have a little bit further conversation about small businesses and policy considerations for that on Monday.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think we've still got a lot of unanswered questions on the commercial side. It seems like every meeting we have, we end up with more questions on the commercial side. So I think we need more time.
Josh, I also noticed with all of the, I guess, of the resources that were provided to us just yesterday, I haven't had time to really go through those. And I think if we could, if we could have another meeting next, even by Monday, it'd give us a chance to at least read through that and see if there's some stuff there that answers some of the questions that we're asking.
A lot of reading, Ken.
I know.
It's a lot.
Clint, did you say that you thought the Chamber of Commerce may weigh in between then and now?
We're meeting with them again later this week to go over this. I can't tell you one way or another if they're going to give a formal recommendation, but we do have a meeting scheduled with them to go over these recommendations.
Well,
and we'll definitely get their input on the small business part of it. See if we can come up with something on that.
is there anyone on the committee right now that's adamantly opposed to just taking up the first one here today and concluding our work next Monday?
Clint, I got a question while we're thinking about that. Doesn't the city have a lot of other initiatives regarding small businesses? Or is that disadvantaged businesses?
There is in that policy, and maybe that's something can send out between now and Monday, is that tax abatement policy as it's written now, so y'all can take a closer look at that as well.
Do we need an actual motion here?
Yeah, I think let's, David, I'm willing to entertain a motion on that first bullet point in terms of whether the committee, I don't know, Clint, if phrasing it right, is approving the adoption of land use assumptions, et cetera.
As written, that could be the motion, the adoption of the LUA, CIP, and the impact fee calculations for the water, wastewater, and road.
Yes.
For the report.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adopt the land use assumptions, capital improvements plan, and impact fee calculations for water, wastewater, and roadways as presented in the impact fee study dated July 2020, which is included here into as attachment A.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Mercer. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we've got a second by Mr. Bland. Do we have any discussion among the committee about this motion? All right, hearing none, city staff, if you could poll the committee.
Benjamin Gomez,
Yes.
Jason Ramos,
No.
Jeremy Vickers,
Yes.
Joe Mayfield,
That's it right there.
Joe Mayfield,
Sorry about that. Yes.
Josh Borderood,
Yes.
Tara Briscoe,
Yes.
David Mercer,
Yes.
Herb Cross,
Yes.
Ken Cooper,
Yes.
Scott Bland.
Yes.
Were there any other commission members that joined after we called the initial roll call?
Enid was on there.
Enid Wade,
Yes.
All right, motion carries, and so it will go as a recommendation to City Council from our committee on that first bullet point. Unanimous. Mr. Peters, is there anything else to take up at this time, or are there any committee members that want any additional information that wasn't discussed for the Monday meeting?
I just want to see if we can clarify what's going to be sent out before our meeting on Monday for review, so that way we can kind of have a final conversation.
We'll send you the tax abatement policy that includes, some of the economic development for small business. And then we'll send you any updated staff recommendation on policy consideration. And then if there's anything else y'all want us to consider or provide.
So this is Enid Wade, and what I'm a little bit curious about after listening is, and I understand the concern about the impact on commercial businesses and small businesses in particular. But the idea is not for it to not impact them. The idea is to actually offset the impact to the community and the unfunded impact. And so I'm curious about what could we find out that would show what comparably sized cities with comparable economic development are doing. Are we completely out of step? Because I don't know how you would ever know exactly what the impact is going to be to economic development incrementally. So I'd be interested in knowing what other cities might be doing and how they would make that sort of evaluation.
It's as far as I guess an economic impact for the impact fees on those communities, or just what other cities are charging?
Yes, and then how they manage that, because what I thought I heard is that what we're doing here is actually maybe more conservative already because of the number of exemptions that we provide. And so I would just like to see where we sit relative to comparably sized cities.
Okay. Yeah, we can provide that, because there's the comparison of cities that charge impact fees that are comparable to us. And then there are peer cities that do not charge impact fees at all. And so there's, the balance between the two, the factors you have to consider, and those that are hard to, compare is all the other assumptions and factors that go into those communities. Whether are they growing? Because the impact fees only cover, needed growth of infrastructure. So, like one of our peer cities is Beaumont. Well, they're losing population, so that's not they're not growing, so they're not having these growth pains on them. So there's a balance on that, and then a lot of our peer cities that are I would call suburbs of large metro areas have completely different dynamics that we've looked at, like Denton and Georgetown. Their fees compared to ours are way up there, but their economic ecosystem is a lot different than ours too. So the one that we've kind of honed in on that we felt like is a good comparison has been College Station, is because we're equal, close in size. It's a college town. They have a similar economy as ours. I mean, I would say ours is a little bit more diverse as far as sector-wise, where they rely more on the college, but they're diversifying in their economy too. So that's the one that we have kind of honed in on as far as comparing ours. And that's I mean, frankly, that's when we looked at our residential fee. College Station had a $5,000 impact fee for a residence, and we made the decision as staff that we wanted to come in a little lower than College Station. So, but we can provide that. We can try to put that into a table and get that for you Monday, just so you can see which cities don't charge impact fees that could be considered peers, and then what the cities that do charge impact fees, what those fees would be.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Clint, as a Baylor guy, I really appreciate you, upping the benchmark on College Station, just on a personal note.
Yeah, we typically want to outdo them, but I think this is a situation where we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
All right, if we don't have any further business, I say I'm sorry, Ken, are you wanting to say something? You're on mute.
Just a quick clarification. Clint, can you tell me the consequences of this if we see in 3 years that there's been some major adjustments in the market? Is it up to the council then at that time to go back and modify this, repeal it, or what would the procedure be?
So there's an automatic by law that you have to revisit it every 5 years. And then anytime before that, that would be, if something happens, we go into a major recession or something like that, something changes, then we could revisit it before then at council's direction.
You know, Clint, Ken, if that might be part of your recommendation, that maybe, you know, council review the impact fee program after year 3, or provide some kind of assessment of how things are going, you know, maybe that can be included as part of that final recommendation.
All right, anyone else? All right, great seeing y'all again, and look forward to seeing you on Monday at the lunch hour, and hopefully we'll wrap up our work, at least in the short term. All right, thanks. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.